Hello, my name is Opemipo Alaba Ijose, and I want to present on the topic which says the impact of tourism on Serengeti National Park pre-COVID-19 pandemic, during the COVID-19 pandemic, and after the COVID-19 pandemic. Before I go forward to furnish you with the information that I have on this subject matter, permit me to share with you my screen. Okay, just like I said, Serengeti National Park is one of the foremost national parks established in Africa. It is actually situated in Tanzania, and in the year 2021, it was voted the best park by Travelers' Choice. It occupies a landmass of about 14,763 square kilometers, and it was discovered between 1800 and 1900. As of this time, there was no notable activities that was ongoing at Serengeti at the time. It was until 1930 to 1937 that sport hunting as an activity was actually promoted. But as a result of the fact that these animals were being hunted incessantly and there is need for protection, there is need for conservation, the stakeholders that were involved with the management of the conservation area at the time bestowed onto the conservation area a protected area status in 1940. And in 1951, it was actually elevated into the status of a national park. That is, the various sustainable activities, human activities can actually undergo, can actually take place within the context of the park as of the time. Well, some environmentalists and associated stakeholders met in Stockholm in 1972 to discuss about the possibility of enlisting Serengeti as a World Heritage Site in the year 1972. And it was until 1981 that this action was actually formalized and Serengeti National Park was listed as UNESCO World Heritage Site. Well, the park is divided into three regions. We have the Serengeti Plains, which has treeless grassland. We have the Western Corridor that is actually denoted with swampy savanna, and then Northern Serengeti, which has woodland, open woodland, and hills. Well, you may want to ask, what's so special about Serengeti? Serengeti is also known for the Big Five. The Big Five means big animals such as lion, elephant, buffalo, rhino, and leopard that cannot be seen just anyhow in any part of the world. Matter of fact, in Africa, these animals are rarely seen because of their conservation status. But I assure you that within the context of Serengeti National Park, these animals are readily available. And that's the more reason why tourists would like to always come to Serengeti and experience wildlife at its fullest. Well, there is something else that is actually associated or is synonymous when you hear the word Serengeti National Park. And this is the Great Migration, the wildebeest Great Migration. During the drought of every year in May, there is this massive movement of ungulate species towards the Masai Mara, where you may want to ask me, what causes this movement of animals from Serengeti to Masai Mara? Well, ungulate depends on what's it called, feed resources to be able to produce perfectly. And within the context of Serengeti National Park, during this period of time, that is the month of May, there is always scarcity and there is always drought within Serengeti National Park. Most of the available resources that are there are so scarce and are scanty. And that's the more reason why this animal would want to move out of the context or out of the shores of Serengeti National Park to a place whereby they can find abundant resources to be able to feed on, and so that they can be able to reproduce very well. During this migration, which takes about 800 kilometers, the wildebeest and the ungulate face a whole lot of threat from predators such as crocodile and the lions. The crocodile will hide in the water waiting for the wildebeest and the ungulate to cross so that they can hunt them and continue their own survival. Likewise, the lion, it is until late October to December, when rain start dropping a little bit, that this animal will find their way back to the core part of Serengeti National Park. That is, the resources that are bound within Serengeti National Park at this point in time are starting to become desirable for the animals. Well, aside from the animals and aside from the fact that Serengeti National Park is actually bestowed with a wide area of land, Serengeti National Park has a very wonderful culture, which is the culture of the Maasai people. The Maasai people occupies part of Tanzania and also part of Kenya. And they've been able to showcase their culture as a product for tourists who are coming to Serengeti to experience sustainable tourism. And so far, so good. It's been going on smoothly, and people appreciate what they have to offer in terms of the dances, in terms of how they go about their local lives, in terms of their ecologies, in terms of their food, and in respect to a whole lot of things that is associated with their culture. Well, permit me to actually talk briefly about tourist influx to Serengeti National Park before the COVID-19 era and after, during the COVID-19 era and after the COVID-19 era. Well, tourists in Tanzania in the year 2019 climbed up to a number of 1.5 million, generating over $2.5 billion for the economy of Tanzania. Serengeti, within this data that I've provided, actually accepted 472,000 visitors in the year 2019, both international and domestic tourists. But shortly after the COVID-19 restriction in March 2020, we discovered that hotels and guest houses, lodges were no longer taking bookings for Serengeti tourists. In late August, when lockdown were easing, that number dropped from 1.5 million to 620,867 tourists in Tanzania. And from this, you can as well just picture the amount of tourists that are visiting Serengeti at the time. I tell you, it's actually no. In 2001, the number of the tourist arrival reached 922,692, equivalent to an increase of 48% from what it was in year 2020, which is 620,867,000. In 2022, the present year, which we're in right now, between January and May this year, Serengeti National Park has actually witnessed about 458,408 foreign tourists so far. This is a significant increase compared to what it was, the percentage was in the year 2001. Well, we are moving on to the section whereby I will talk about the various impact of tourism at Serengeti National Park. First and foremost on my list is economic impact. Well, Serengeti National Park, the management of Serengeti National Park has successfully trained tour guides within the local environment. And with this, the salary they are being paid, in fact, the knowledge they are being given has actually helped them to be able to go about their daily livelihood perfectly. The ripple effect of their salary gotten from the job as a tour guide being used for the betterment of their salary. So you will agree with me that tourism at Serengeti National Park has actually influenced the life of local communities positively, and also it has also improved or possibly generate employment opportunities. As you can see from this slide, employment generated as a result of tourism activities in Serengeti National Park is higher than the others, which is 37.5%. And also its ripple effect, the ripple effect of tourism activities or Serengeti on trade opportunities at Serengeti environment is notable. As you can see that trade has actually boosted, and tourism activities as a result of Serengeti National Park has also boosted. Economic contribution of Serengeti National Park to communities adjacent the park. From this table, it is obvious that Rubanda Village, Makunduzi Village, District Council, and Ikona has actually benefited immensely from finances which is generated due to activities that are bound within Serengeti territory. For instance, people giving out bed for tourists, people engaging in photographic tourism, and and so on and so forth. Tourism contribution also to women employment at Ikoma village in Serengeti. If you look at the chart, the table very well critically, you will discover with me that a large percentage or proportion of the women who are there at Ikoma in Serengeti are actually involved in one way or the other in tourism activities. And this actually fetch them money, which they take home to be able to better the lives of their family. Well, I've been talking about the various economic positive impact of Serengeti National Park to the livelihood of the communities, but yet there is also this negative effect or negative impact associated with the development of tourism in Serengeti. For instance, economic leakages is actually encouraged by tourism. What do I mean by economic leakages? Before the advent of tourism development within the territory of Serengeti, the local people have always been going about their activities, selling whatever little things they have, and and it's been going on smoothly for them. But then when tourism came on board, we discovered that the investors and the managers of tourism at Serengeti National Park, to an extent, have been able to consider international influence over the local ventures of the community. And this, to an extent, has actually affected the trade of the local people significantly, as some of them, their businesses are no longer forthcoming because tourists who come around prefer to actually buy imported goods from the standard what's it called, shopping centers that are there, and it's affecting the lives of the local people significantly. So this is what we mean by economic leakages. Money or finances meant to actually reside in the community as a result of the establishment of tourism within that context is being taken out, because people who engage in businesses within that local context are not actually the local people. I will move to environmental impact. First and foremost, I would like to talk about the negative impact which the road construction and ecologist infrastructure have actually caused within the shores of Serengeti. From the pictures here, you can see that road construction within Serengeti has degraded the natural environment, thereby causing the disappearance of some species of organism that serves as prey to some animals. And also, if you can see, the road construction in an instant here has actually altered what's it called, the behavior of some animals. As you can see in the pictures, some lions are actually lost because of the presence of road, which actually enables frequent car movement within the context of Serengeti. And if you can also see, the construction of ecologies has actually destabilized and degraded the environment. Places that are meant to actually be left intact for a regeneration of fauna, floral resources to host fauna organisms are being degraded for the sake of establishing ecologies. This is anti-conservation of the environment. And also, game viewing effect on wildlife feeding behaviors. Most of wildlife species are always shy species who do not like going about their activities in the presence of human beings. But as a result of tourism development within the context of Serengeti, we have tourists who are coming around without respecting the privacies of these animals. When these animals are feeding, they tend to actually disrupt their activities. When these animals are moving around, they disrupt their activities. When these animals are even trying to reproduce, we tend to see tourists who are there trying to catch a glance of what is actually going on. This is anti-conservation, and it is not actually helping the environmental status of the park. One of the positive environmental impact of tourism at Serengeti National Park is the fact that the development of tourism within Serengeti National Park has enabled the conservation of wildlife, thereby having an abundance of fauna species. For instance, we have prey species growing at an outrageous rate because conservation is actually eminent within the context of Serengeti. And this has actually helped predators because they tend to have more animals to feed on or more prey to feed on. So to an extent, it helps a natural selection, and it enhances the survival of big game animals who are actually predator within the context of Serengeti National Park. Well, let me also talk about the social impact. The road construction, though it has its own negative impact on the environmental section, but also on the social impact, I can categorically tell you that the road construction also has a positive impact, because Prior to the development or the establishment of this route, communities surrounding Serengeti National Park have always found it so difficult to migrate from one part of the country to another. Most of them are farmers and they will want to sell their produce, and it becomes very difficult for them because there was no what's called viable route which they can actually access to get and go and sell their produce. As you can see from the pictures, students who are even what's it called children of people in the local communities are happy because of the development of the road, because they can as well just move from their place of abode to their schools, and it becomes easier for them. Learning becomes easier for them on that basis. Also, there are a whole lot of community projects that have been facilitated by Serengeti National Park, which brings about a positive social benefit. For instance, Serengeti National Park is actually responsible for building teachers' houses. They actually build dispensary wards, they rehabilitate classroom, they complete village offices, they purchase desks for students, they purchase furniture for home, they build bedmasters, they rehabilitate teachers, they complete administrative building. What I've mentioned so far are some of the notable contribution of the management of Serengeti National Park to the social development of Serengeti as a community. Tourism development in Serengeti has also promoted gender equality. As you can see, the development of tourism has actually motivated women gender to be able to take up some wonderful roles in the society. For instance, selling, housekeeping, waitress in hotel, clean garden, storekeeping, shopkeeping, photographing, tour guide, and so on and so forth. Prior to the development of tourism, it is always very difficult for women to actually take up this responsibility, and the burden in the household has actually been been on the shoulder of the men all the time. But as a result of the development of tourism in Serengeti National Park, it becomes very easy for these women to pick up job in the tourism sector and to be able to fend for themselves. Tourism as a tool for enabling population growth. This is an example of a negative social impact of tourism at Serengeti National Park. This is the bigger picture. Well, tourism is blossoming in Serengeti, and this tend to actually invite people from all walks of life looking for greener pasture because of the booming economy as a result of tourism at Serengeti. This to an extent brings about scarcity of resources, because when you have too many people migrating down to a place, and prior to this time we have to an extent a considerable amount of resources, what will happen is there will be competition, and that is not actually good as a social term, as a social situation in any community. So tourism at Serengeti National Park has actually enabled, promoted competition as a result of migrant coming into Serengeti and asks to come and to come and find a living, to go about to get a greener pasture for the sake of greener pasture. Tourism also has disenfranchised the Maasai people of their social livelihood. Prior to the development of tourism at Serengeti National Park, the Maasai people are living wonderfully well, living within their means. They are very comfortable with their culture, they love what they are doing, but as a result of the development of tourism, their lands are being taken away from them. Most of them are farmers, most of them are herdsmen. They can no longer farm, they can no longer rear their animals. And profit being made for tourism most of the time are not actually well distributed within this community. So it becomes very difficult for these people to actually thrive within the limited means which they have. So tourism to the Maasai people in some aspect poses a negative effect on them. Well, before I actually talk about the recommendations that I have or solutions that can actually suffice this situation, I would like to create a link between the impact that I've actually stated and before the COVID-19 pandemic, during the COVID-19 pandemic, and after the COVID-19 pandemic. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, come to think about it, all the various positive effects that are being generated as a result of tourism at Serengeti. economy was blossoming, the social livelihood was so good, environment was doing well. But as a result of the fact that pandemic came to ground and, traveling restrictions actually happened, well, it has its own positive side and it also has its own negative side. For instance, the economic aspect of it, there was a whole lot of negative side because there were no tourists coming to Serengeti and, there was no money being generated by the management. So it becomes very difficult for the management of Serengeti National Park to carry out a whole lot of social projects. In fact, people who are fully engaged before the COVID-19 pandemic under Serengeti National Park management were all laid off because there were no tourists to cater for. So fathers who were working at Serengeti, mothers who were working at Serengeti, and some younger adults who were working in Serengeti had nothing to do during this COVID-19 pandemic, and this destabilized the existence a whole lot because, truthfully speaking, tourism at Serengeti National Park was expected to be an alternative livelihood to the previously way in which these people were living, which was unsustainable. But for the fact that tourism stopped during the COVID-19 pandemic bring the entire life to an halt. To feed was so difficult for them. To go about their social livelihood was so difficult for them. But then if you look at it from the other aspect, which is the environmental aspect, you will agree with me that the pandemic also has its own positive side because the ecosystem was able to regenerate. Floral species that were degraded as a result of the development of roads or probably the movement of vehicles to and fro every now and then. But for the fact that these vehicles were not coming, the roads were at peace, a whole lot of floral resources were able to regenerate. Animals were able to live where there was no disturbance. There was no one coming around to see animals when they were eating, when they were reproducing, and when they were doing, whatever it is that they were doing. So it becomes a notable positive impact on the environmental aspect of Serengeti National Park that the pandemic actually happened. What we always call regenerative tourism. Well, to an extent, I would say that's how it regenerates the environment for them. Pandemic regenerated the natural environment for Serengeti National Park. And on the aspect of the social aspect, cultural aspect, where it's it's both-sided. To an extent, the Maasai people were able to fall back to their previous ways of living, that is their previous livelihood, which to an extent was not sustainable. But at the same time, they had less tourists coming around to erode their cultural heritage, as a result of the fact that pandemic was imminent as of this time. But then you agree with me that most of this, what's it called, Maasai people, depend solely on tourism. I mean, they market their, cultural heritage. They showcase their dances. They have houses which they use as ecologists. They prepare food for these tourists. So to an extent, to a considerable extent, economic-wise, it wasn't really sustainable on the aspect. So from there, we'll move forward to situations or probably solutions that I think can actually suffice the various problems that I've mentioned earlier on. In respect to the road infrastructure be constructed within the context of Serengeti National Park, I think it will be advisable, it will be logical for such roads to be redesigned so that it will not hamper the growth of various ecological resources within the context of Serengeti, and also establishment of legislation that support conservation-oriented tourism behavior. Yes, exactly. Tourism who comes around to Serengeti must be able to imbibe an ecocentric attribute. That is, they must be able to abide by the do's and don'ts of conservation wherever they find themselves within the context of Serengeti. And also the construction of game viewing circuit should be encouraged for tourists who actually disturbs the activities of the animals. I believe that if the management of Serengeti can actually make provision for game viewing circuits at strategic places within the context of the park, it will go a long way to actually stop the disturbance of animals. And also the reduction of immigration pull factor and promotion of family planning. When as regards to the scarce resources that are bound during the COVID-19 period at Serengeti National Park, well, if the management of the country can actually see to how they can, encourage family planning, I think the less resources that are bound within the jurisdiction of the community will be enough, even when subsequent disasters or probably natural disaster happens. And also the reduction of immigration. Well, there should be a way whereby the national government of Tanzania should be able to look for means to discourage people from actually coming to establish at Serengeti, aside the local people who were pre-existing, who were living formerly in this area. Because if you allow too much people to actually infiltrate Serengeti because the economic livelihood is blossoming, it will get to a stage whereby it will reach a threshold level, and the resources that are actually available won't be able to cater for every individual that are there. Also, sensitization of village land act by NGOs. For instance, in the situation whereby the Maasai people land have been displaced, have been taken away for the purpose of tourism, and this doesn't really sit well with them. Where if you can sensitize the village people about their right of owning lands, this has to be carried out by the NGO. I think to an extent they will be able to stand for themselves, and they will be able to use their land sustainably, because they've been doing it way before. Back in Memoria, they've been using their lands. They've been successfully using their land. They've been managing the natural resources. So we shouldn't say tourism, we shouldn't impose tourism on them, or we shouldn't impose the activities of tourism on them. That should also be local capacity should also be encouraged, and equity in employment should be made possible. Local capacity in the sense that the local individuals, for instance, the productive demographic at Serengeti, which are the youth, should be trained very well in so many livelihood activities, so that even when natural occurrences happen, if they are not fully engaged within the tourism sectors, they can stand on their own. They can be able to stand on their own when you train them, when you give them when you improve the local capacity of the productive demographic within Serengeti. Even if we have a future pandemic, these people will be able to stand on their own, because they have what they are doing as a result of the training you've given them to be able to build their capacity. And also, there must be equity in employment. If Serengeti National Park wants to employ today, they must consider the local people first. And that's the only way whereby they can achieve, or they can be able to get the utmost support from the local communities. And with that, sustainability, conservation, and ecotourism will be achieved quite well. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I really appreciate you, and I hopefully will have more of this to do together. Thank you.